Welcome back to WaterparkRanger's Let's Play Pikmin 2. Last episode, we met up with the yellow Pikmin and got our first treasure in the perplexing pool. And this episode, we're going to go into our first dungeon in the perplexing pool. Of course, this is the fourth dungeon that we'll have visited thus far. And we could have gone into it yesterday, but I had a good reason not to. You see, it's not a good idea to go in there without yellows, despite the fact that it's literally right next to your ship with next to no obstacles in the way besides one yellow Wollywog. Normally I would recommend bringing along, say, I guess 10 purples, but since we're not using them for battle, they're going to be of no use to us in there. Even though there's no poison in the dungeon, bring along a couple whites, and definitely some yellows, because there are electricity hazards in there, and they can be avoided, but it's just easier to deal with them if you have yellows, and in addition, the boss is easier to defeat if you have yellows. So that's why you need to bring yellows, and the whites are not for poison. Instead, there's actually buried treasure in there, and you'd have no way of knowing it unless you went in there and found out for yourself that there was a treasure you couldn't get. My sensors are giving out foreboding signals. These signals could very well mean that this hole is filled with wretched, nasty bugs. Vicious, program-terminating bugs. Filthy, dirty, disgusting things! And so in here, you definitely want to bring along some whites so you can get that buried treasure, because otherwise, you'll have no way of knowing that there's buried treasure in here. So generally, it's a good idea to bring along a couple whites into the different dungeons you go in, regardless of whether or not they have poison hazards, just for the fact that there might be buried treasure. And with that, let's begin the Citadel of Spiders. In terms of difficulty, I'd say this dungeon is a little bit tougher than the others so far. Normally when I'm playing the game, and this is with sprays and using purples, this is a place where I'll lose maybe my first Pikmin, or first couple of Pikmin. So I wonder how I'm going to do in this run. That enemy right there was a skitterleaf. It is in fact a harmless enemy that cannot hurt Pikmin. It's just there as an interesting thing to fight. These are shearwigs, you recognize them as the green termites that we fought above in the perplexing pool. They're down here as well. They're easy to defeat if you throw Pikmin on top of them or swarm them. Nothing that you haven't seen before there. And of course you've seen those eggs before. If you break them, basically you get nectar. Or if you've been collecting sprays from berries, you can sometimes get red dose of spicy spray or a purple dose of bitter spray. And yeah, I explained what bitter spray was last episode. And the forest treasure is right over here, and it's a nice bright red tomato. So we have rescued Bob the Tomato of VeggieTales lore. And yes, there really is not much need to switch control between the two captains very often when you're in dungeons, because your goals are usually so straightforward. However, I think that for some of the later ones that actually might be useful, and you see what I've done right there, is actually I've activated that useless knapsack ability. What you have to do is press X and then just keep holding it down. When you press any other button, or maybe even move the control stick, I forget which, it'll break the pilot out of the trance and get him to wake up. Although I think you can still use the camera to a certain extent. And yeah, that tomato has a weird name, I'll admit. But there is a reason for it. If you check out Olimar's journal, which I have been posting on the video descriptions for every single treasure we found, in case you didn't know, you might want to go back and watch my older videos and check the video descriptions. They have Olimar's journal entries for every single treasure that we find. So it kind of has a nice, like, ongoing story in the background, along with the video, which I think is really quite cool. And it's actually allowed me to keep better track of the way that the story progresses through Olimar's view. Now you can see what the Olimar's view is really like. And in here we got some enemies called fiery dweevils. It's best to really avoid them for the most part. Fight the yellow Wollywogs. This one over here is actually holding a treasure. That's right, there are some enemies that when you defeat them, they will have actually ingested treasures. So you have to get them to throw it up by defeating them. And the fiery dweevil will actually pick up treasures and enemies and walk around with them on its back. Really, it will not go out of its way to attack you, so you can be nice to it as long as it's not trying to make off with the treasure. And, Royal Crown, what is this, like, British soda? Yeah, there's some treasures just, like, haphazardly scattered around here. We have another thing, which is like a, I think a thing of lipstick over there. No, that is not a chainsaw. And the reds will, quickly make use of... Whoa! You want to be careful with Wollywogs, because especially in their last jump, even though you might have taken care of their HP, doesn't necessarily mean that they can't kill Pikmin when they're falling back down, so watch out for that. In addition to fiery dweevils, we have some fiery jets. Fortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to have to fight any fiery dweevils, because they haven't gotten in the way. And let's see how much this baby's worth. Only 50. Well, that's not much to speak of. Don't give me lip. Oh no, my Pikmin are on fire! And an egg just fell. Yeah, we're gonna have to whistle to get that fire out. Emergency! Pikmin are suffering. If you blow your whistle with B, you may be able to help them. Oh crap! Midites! That's what came out of the egg! Oh boy, these things. Right, these things just send Pikmin into a frenzy, running around like idiots whenever they appear. Normally, I would suggest a single purple taking their entire swarm out. They can't actually hurt Pikmin, but they'll definitely disrupt them. They're only dangerous when in conjunction with other hazards or enemies. Otherwise, they can't really hurt Pikmin. So just keep that in mind. Midites can sometimes come out of those eggs when you break them. That's right, even from honey wisps, sometimes they'll just emerge. Usually that's the only place you'll find Midites. There are a few preset Midite hordes that are located in specific dungeons, but that's very infrequent. One of the only times they appear is actually in the Hole of Beasts. On the 4th floor, they usually appear in one of the corners, but actually, now that I think about it, we didn't actually get that to happen in this playthrough. Yeah, Midites are harmless, but if you throw a single purple Pikmin at them, you can immediately take out their whole horde in a single hit, because the shockwave will take care of them all. Purples are basically the Whitebeard of Pikmin, and they're just as cheap and just as probably good that we're not using them for our fights. And this floor is a lot bigger than the others so far in the Citadel of Spiders. Might as well knock down that wall. There's an egg back there. I should mention that there is a preset trap on this floor. In one of the alcoves... whoa! That's not what I meant to talk about. I'll mention that later. That specific candy bot bud is rather special. In one of the alcoves, I'm not sure if it'll be this one. Yep, it's this one! A swooping stitch bug will drop down as a trap to grab your Pikmin. You've seen these things before for perplexing pool. They try and plate your Pikmin. They were in the first game too, in case you forgot. So that flower over there was called the Queen Candy Pot Bud. If you are running low on Pikmin, and you enter a floor with less than 100, you can throw a single Pikmin in there, and it will actually send out up to 8 more Pikmin, depending on how many you currently don't have. Like, if you have 92, you can get the maximum amount from the Queen Candy Pot Bud. And yet another new feature, these enemies that I'm flipping over and defeating are anode beetles. They're only dangerous if they're in pairs, because when they're in pairs, they can choose to send an electric shock beam, basically, between the 2 beetles. And any Pikmin that gets stuck in that electricity, if they're not yellow, instant death. That's right, electricity is insta-kill in this game. And you definitely want to be careful around it for that reason. Now, you can go after anode beetles with any kind of Pikmin. It's safest to do with yellows. Normally, I would recommend purples because you don't have to throw them directly on top of them, and they seem to home in on the enemies that they hit. So yes, purples are actually recommended for dealing even with elemental foes, even the electricity kind. There might only be one exception, and it's an enemy that we're going to face late in the game, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, if there's only one anode beetle left on the floor, you don't have to worry about it, because individually they can't hurt Pikmin, but if they're together, their electricity is quite dangerous. And wow, another treasure that was just, like, right there, not even in an alcove. Usually treasures are kind of in alcoves, and here you see the white Pikmin are kind of freaking out, because there is a treasure buried under there. And I guess because some of the whites grabbed that treasure earlier, we don't have all of them working on it, so it's going to take a little bit longer. Oh, never mind, all the Pikmin are starting to unearth it. Awesome, teamwork. This incredible teamwork will definitely help us rise to victory. And yes, there are also wooden walls, just like the ones on the overworld, in the underground. However, they are incredibly fragile and nowhere near as sturdy as the barriers that you encounter in the overworld. And I'm just giving you a little close-up at that anode beetle there. It's really quite an adorable little enemy. And if we're careful, there really shouldn't be a problem for us during this Let's Play. The fact remains they're actually an incredibly common underground enemy. It's kind of sad that I know this, but I think that as far as the number of enemies there are in the game, the anode beetle is simply one of the most common of them, even more common than, I think, sheer grubs. You find them in a lot of the underground areas. And as you can see, unless you flip an anode beetle over, you won't be able to hurt them. Otherwise, Pikmin will just attack their shell, which is completely useless, even if it's amusing to watch them fight it. Not amusing if there's a couple, because then they'll all run after it. If they're not yellow, they'll get they'll get TKO'd by that electric beam. And with that said, we'll continue down through the Citadel of Spiders next episode, doing the last 2 levels here. See you then.